Hi there, I'm Charlie Smith. I'm editor of the Georgia Straight newspaper in Vancouver. And this week I'm going to talk about three articles that I wrote. As you can see behind me, there's a fair number of books. I like reading books. And the book that I focused on this week in the paper is called Every Conversation Counts. And it's by a broadcaster named Riaz Medji, who's quite well known in Vancouver. Riaz hosted the breakfast television show for 11 years. But this book, it surprised me because I'd always thought of him as this kind of upbeat, friendly interviewer. But there was quite a lot of depth in this book, and it focused on forging human connections and how conversations can do this. And it struck me as especially timely in the pandemic, because right now the loneliness, an Angus Reid survey, for instance, reported that 2 in 5 young people are feeling lonely, both men and women. And we have seniors who are feeling isolated. People aren't able to see their grandchildren. They aren't able to visit friends because of the lockdown and all these restrictions on public health. But through conversation, we can actually forge stronger connections if we pay attention. And one of the things Riaz pointed out is we're often distracted when we're talking on the phone or we're emailing or we're in social media with people. And that's because our brains can actually process 400 to 500 words per minute, but most of us only say up to about 120, 125 words per minute. So that leaves you with a whole bunch of extra brain capacity that we might do by multitasking or employ in other ways. And what Riaz advocates is to actually listen to people and focus on what they're saying and have active listening. And by doing that, you can sometimes pick up other aspects of maybe even things they're not saying or things they're saying that you're not totally catching about issues they may be facing or problems that they're encountering. And by listening with empathy, you can forge a stronger connection and perhaps help them deal with their issues. And similarly, it goes in the opposite direction. If we're feeling that way as a result of issues in our lives. So he included 5 approaches that people can take, and active listening was one of them. Another one that I quite liked was he said, make the people you're talking to feel like a hero in some sort of way. So he used to do this as a talk show host. And he's done thousands of interviews, and he's learned a lot through that process. And another point he used to do when he was in the green room, and green rooms are areas where people are waiting before they go on the air, he'd always ask them, what's on your mind? Just as an opening question. And that was a way to find out what they were really thinking about, and then he would amplify that. So I've worked in radio for years, and a lot of talk show hosts, they have their lists of questions that they ask, and it's almost like automatic. But what he would do was, in some cases, throw away the script and actually listen to what people are saying and respond to them. And I think that's a good way, if you kind of cultivate curiosity, which is something he emphasizes in his book as well, that you actually become more engaged with other people. And in a pandemic, I think that's particularly valuable. So I recommend Riaz's book, and you might walk away. One of the things, I even used it just recently in email correspondence with Riaz himself. I sent him kind of a curt, quick email, and then I realized I should be paying attention to what he's advocating in his book. So I followed up with another email explaining that I've learned from your book. I know the last email was a little curt, and emails can be misinterpreted, but here's a more fulsome explanation for what happened. And I think he got a kick out of it that his book actually was having an effect on me, who did the article about it. The next story I'm going to talk about is living in small or compact apartments. And Michael Mortensen is a planner and a developer in Vancouver and a director of an organization called Small Housing BC. And he is almost like an evangelist when it comes to how small apartments are not as problematic as some of the critics say, because the development industry has been leaning more towards building smaller units because of the cost of land and construction and taxes and everything else. So what Michael points out, that he has this term 4D design that we need to do, which is incorporating the element of time into looking at apartments. So a bedroom, for instance, he doesn't see as a 24-hour room. You really only use your bedroom for about 8 hours. So through convertible furniture, you can have your bed disappear behind a table or into the wall, and then so there's this term called flex space, which is taking on much more importance in an expensive city like Vancouver, where people are converting rooms to multiple uses through the course of the day. And you can do this because the furniture industry has evolved to the point where they're producing products that have multiple uses. So you can take a coffee table, for instance. It can be elevated to a desk, and then it can be elongated into a dining table, all from one location. And so Michael's saying that it's possible to have an eminently livable 600 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment. And he's been distributing a video that shows how this works. And I found that quite fascinating. Now, the third story that I'm going to talk about, I did an interview with Joshua Beamish, who's one of the leading dancers in Vancouver and internationally renowned. And so he's been dealing with the pandemic like everyone else, but it's been very challenging for the dance community. So he's come up with 5 films that he's created, and some of them spin out of the pandemic. So he's called it Proximity, and put a lot of thought into proximity. What happens when people come together? What happens when they can't come together? And he even looked into the science of proximity and how we can actually feel the kind of electromagnetic waves from another person's heart when we're close to them. So he did this elaborate duet where he and the other dancer didn't touch but came within millimeters of one another. And then at other times they were opposite, this vast space between them on stage. And he used the music from Interstellar, the movie, to kind of show how the pandemic has some things in common with how people live in outer space. And, very, very thoughtful. And so he choreographed a couple of solos. He did a film as part of this project. And then he also worked with 2 other choreographers that he really admires to do 2 other films. So these 5 films are all coming forth from the Dance Center through March and performed as part of the Push International Festival that's here in Vancouver. And I think it's worth seeing. And you can look at the video here and see just how talented he is. So that's my report for this week. I'm Charlie Smith, editor of the Georgia Straight. Find us at www.straight.com, and thanks for watching.